Now we've got something special. 2 speakers, double the wisdom, double the energy. Let me introduce you with the first one. His name is Dan Tyre, and he was an employee number 6 at HubSpot. He has also helped to build 2 other billion-dollar businesses, and he's a total sales guy. If you look at his resume, it's sales, sales, sales. So I believe if you have the smallest sales strategy you want to validate, grab Dan by the hand and ask him the question.
And joining him is Živile Einikite, an event host, podcast Perception Paradox creator, where she explores underdog stories. But what is really even more impressive is that she's a kite surfer and motorbike enthusiast. So a really strong person, really strong woman. And together they will really explore and take us through 4 decades of startup chaos, miracles, and everything in between.
Awesome.
So let's welcome Dan and Živile.
Hello, everyone. Good morning, TechChill 2025.
Yeah, I like that.
So,
Focus, energy.
you're up for a treat, guys. You know, I have a lot of energy, but here in front of me, we have Dan Tyre, who is like 10x energy. So,
Thank you, Z.
how are you today, Dan?
I am off the charts great. I skew very positive. Love to be back in Riga, and super fun to spend the next 40 minutes with you.
Likewise. So Dan is someone who is super positive, and I recall last year at TechChill when you came, it was spring, and you said, well, when I researched Latvia, it seemed to be so cold, snow, and it's so warm, it's colder in the US where I'm from. So how is now?
It's very funny. 2 weeks ago I was in Antarctica, right?
Correct.
It's colder in Riga than it is in Antarctica, right? The wind chill is a little bit different in Antarctica, but the weather isn't the reason we come here, right?
Absolutely.
TechChill is a great event, and you and I have known each other for a year, right? We met on a bus, which probably sounds weird from the stage, but that's what happened, right? And we've been in contact ever since. We did a podcast together of your great podcast, amazing, and glad to be on the stage to talk about 40 years of startup chaos.
Yeah, which is wild, right? We're talking about 6 startups, 2 unicorns, right? And 40 years of experience. And
That's right, 46 years of experience.
46 years,
66
that's a lot.
years old. It's amazing. And the 2 unicorns were the first and the last, right?
Yeah.
So I spent 9 years at Businessland, and then 17 years at HubSpot as the first sales employee number 6 to employee. At the end of 17 years, we had 8,000 employees and $2.4 billion in revenue, worth about $30 billion.
That's wild. So
amazing. And I'm the luckiest guy in the world. You know, I've been married for 35 years. I have 2 socially responsible kids.
Yeah.
And I support entrepreneurship all over the world. And when Louisa invited me to Latvia, I'm like, where is Latvia exactly? And she's like, it's next to Estonia. And I'm like, is it in the Caribbean? And she's like, no, not really. And I'm like, okay, well, let's go. And so I was here in 2024. It was super fun, and now I'm back. And
amazing.
Yeah.
We're really glad to have you back. So let's dive into the beginning of your story, because you have a very interesting 2 angles, right?
Yes.
Building startups 46 years ago, and then with HubSpot, it's completely different ball game. So let's start with Businessland. How did you got into entrepreneurship, and what are your major lessons of actually growing it to a unicorn?
Very good. And you want a funny story, right? The audience want a funny story?
We like funny stories, right?
Okay, I know. So when I graduated from high school, I was a bass player in a rock and roll band. I had hair about as long as yours, which, as you know, it's a little hard to take care of. And the great thing about playing as a musician is it's super fun, but it doesn't pay a lot of money, at least in the United States. So I had to get a real job, and I had worked my way through university selling books door to door. And so I got a sales job selling computers in 1981. And I worked for the worst run company in American business. It was called the Computer Store. They had 3 locations, and they sold Apple IIes and IBM computers, and it was horribly run. It had horrible leadership, inventory problems, nepotism problems, sales problems, and I joined them because they're the only people who give me a job, and I was there for 11 months, and then my boss comes in, and he's like, I'm quitting. And I'm like, why? He's like, I'm going to go to a startup. I'm like, what is a startup, actually? He goes, it's a small company that's going to grow very quickly. I'm like, knock yourself out. And he's like, no, I want to bring you with me. I'm like, I already got a job. He's like, I'll give you $75 more a month. And I'm like, okay, I'm a startup guy. So I left my job to start with this company that had $100,000 worth of revenue. They had 20 or so employees. And over the next 9 years, they grew from 100,000 to $1.4 billion. They IPO'd, they secondaried. I started as a salesperson. The founders of the company, Dave Norman and Enzo Terezi, great guys, had a good business model. And as the company scaled, I went from a salesperson to sales manager to an area director to teaching sales training to running the New York area. And the last job I had when I was 28 years old was responsible for 350 people, $250 million of revenue, and I was responsible for 30% of the profits for a publicly traded company. So I was kind of a big deal. But I never would have gotten into the startup world unless Roger, who was a great guy, he was a band leader. He never swore. He was just a nice guy. And he's like, no, I want to take you with me. And then I fell in love with the startup scene, right? And back then it was a little bit different. No one had ever heard of a startup. No one had ever heard of venture capital. My buddy Kevin Compton, who was one of the early employees of Businessland, went to one of the early VC companies, Kleiner Perkins, right, in Silicon Valley, and have done amazing over the last 50 years. And I'm like, venture capital? Why would you go into venture capital? I never even heard of it. But I learned some very valuable lessons at Businessland.
What did you learn?
And so first of all, every business is a people business, right? And moving from Boston to LA to San Francisco, people are a little bit different, right? But they're still people, right? And if you really want to lead either a company or an industry or even a speaking event, you have to win the hearts and minds of the people that you're working with. And that is a consistent thing that is carried over to 2025, right? Especially in the AI age, what people crave is that personal connection. What they really want is the humanness. And when you're working for someone, if you're working in a team, right, not forgetting that people are human beings becomes very important. Number two, I learned that people will work harder if there's a stated mission, right? So having a mission was important back in the 1980s, but super important in 2025. We talked about this in our briefing meeting, right? It used to be that employees were disposable, right? If somebody left, you just got another one. Today, right, that tribal knowledge and the ability to work together is critical. In fact, ask the audience, which is more important, employees or customers? Raise your hand if you think it's employees. Raise your hands if you think it's customers. All right, so the answer to that, thank you very much for dimming the lights. I would say 3/4 of people said employees, and you're right? Because if you don't have happy employees, you can't have happy customers, right? So the balance has tipped, especially with declining birth rates, and it's harder to get really high-quality people, right? You really have to lean into that culture, and you have to get the right employees. That mission helps you do that, right? Because people want to accomplish something together as a team. And the third thing I learned is always have a plan, because it's very interesting. That business changed so much. When we started, there were 60 points of margin in every product that we sold. So there were big, fat, value-added margins. At the end of 9 years, the margins were down to 12%. So the changes in the business model moved very, very quickly. And if you don't have a plan, right, number one, you can't navigate through those industry changes. Number two, you don't know if you're ahead or behind. Number three, as been stated by Ernest previously, like founders are delusionally positive, right? They think they could do anything, right? And this whole Tech Jill event, it all caters to the feeling that we're out there doing something that's really meaningful. But numbers don't lie. And as both a startup guy and an investor, right, I always look at the number first. And having that plan really helped us scale to $1 billion.
Okay, and how was it different when you were scaling with HubSpot? You were this superstar, number 6 employee. I remember the beginning of HubSpot. That's so wild.
I know.
But it seems like it was a bit different already, the cycles of a business as you were going through than with Businessland, right?
Amazing, because 100% of the stuff that I learned, except for those 3 things, changed in 2007. I was president of a software company in Phoenix, Arizona, where I live. And in my 4th startup, my boss was Brian Halligan. When Microsoft bought Groove Networks, he went to MIT, met Dharmesh, the co-founder of HubSpot, and they called me to join the company. And I lived in Phoenix, and they started the company in Boston, in Cambridge actually, but right next to Boston, in Massachusetts. And I'm like, I live 2,600 miles away. Why do you want me to work for the company? They're like, you're a good startup guy, which I was, right? And I'm like, okay, what do you want me to do? And they're like, cold call. And I'm like, hold on a second. You want me to go from being president of a software company to cold calling? And they're like, yeah, that's what we need you to do. And I'm like, okay, I'm in. And my philosophy in like starting HubSpot is that I had already done 5 startups, but this was going to be different. Of the first 10 employees, all of the other 9 employees were all graduates of MIT Sloan School. So they all had MBAs. They were all super smart. The business model was very innovative. And in 2007, the internet was just growing as a way people would search to understand what to buy. Now, 18 years later, it's like, of course you're going to look at the interviews, you're going to look at the internet, you're going to look at reviews, you're going to look at product stuff. Back then, it was just getting started, right? So it was very, very innovative. And I remember interviewing in Boston and meeting Mark Roberge, who was my first boss. He was the vice president of sales at HubSpot. He brought us, he defined the strategy and led the sales team from 0 to $100 million in 7 years, right? So the first thing that was different is things moved much more quickly. Right? Number 2, this was a very innovative business model. The whole inbound marketing process. This is the first time anybody talked about tricking out your website so that you could attract people to come to find you, and then having to convert on your website by filling out a form, right? We call that a lead or an MQL, and no one had ever done that before, and we were selling software that facilitated that. So I remember Mark talking on the phone, and I had spent the majority of my 40 years at that point in time being an enterprise salesperson, meaning going to all of these people, talking to them face-to-face, and working through whether they were interested in qualifying them and dealing. And now he was doing it all over the phone. And I remember watching him, and I could only hear half the conversation, but he's like, yeah, that's what this software does. Yeah, we can generate leads for it. Oh, yeah, you can start tomorrow. Just give me your credit card. And he took the credit card right over the phone. I'm like, are you kidding me? In 20 minutes, he got somebody to give him it. Now, in 2025, we don't take the credit card over the phone anymore. But he wrote down the digits. He wrote them down, and I'm like, I do not have that skill. I want that skill. Okay. And so I started as a first salesperson, and it was amazing. I had no idea what I was doing. I had good classic sales process, and I did what I urge all founders. There was somebody at the keynote, I think it was Anya, who said, people in the audience want practical advice. Right?
Always, yes.
Okay. So the practical advice is when you're a founder and you're starting to scale, the first thing you need is a product. Second thing you need is customers, right? And you get your customers by selling to your friends. Not giving the product to your friends, but selling to your friends, right? And that's what I did. I called up all my friends and family. I'm like, you got to buy this new HubSpot stuff. And they're like, what? And I'm like, you got to buy it with your own money. And at the time, it was $250 a month. Right? And they're like, why? I'm like, do you need leads to grow your business? And they're like, yeah, everybody needs leads to grow your business. I'm like, that's why. And they would say, well, does it work? I'm like, yes, it works. And the reason I know it works is a long story, but it did. And so scaling that, all founders, when you're first starting out, you sell to friends and family. You sell to people who know and trust you. And then once they have the product, right, you have to add between 3, 5, or 10 times the value that they're paying you. That's a thing that I learned at HubSpot, right? People aren't going to keep buying it unless you keep providing value. Right? And if you don't provide at least 3x the value that they're paying, people will churn. You won't retain them. But if you're at 5 times value, in other words, you give me $1, I give you $5 worth of value, you'd sign up for that, wouldn't you?
I guess so, yeah.
If I gave you 10 times the value, would you buy it? And you'd retain. And so that's the new rules of customer retention now. And that's what I learned at HubSpot. Moving very, very quickly, right? Being mission driven, but we scaled from 0 to $100 million in 7 years. One of the fastest scale between 2007 and 2017 that would be 10 years, 2017, that had ever happened. And so things would come at us very, very quickly. There were all kinds of changes, competitors, differences, right? So what I learned, most importantly, is it's not what I knew, it's what I could pivot to learn. So at HubSpot, I became a learn-it-all, right? And at 47 years old, as the first salesperson for HubSpot, everything I learned in 2007 was totally different in 2009. And then everything was different by 2011, and it was different in 2015. And then 2019, we started to get it right, and then COVID hit, right? And now in the AI age, everything's moved so quickly. And if you think you know what's going on, just wait 3 weeks, right?
Yeah.
Because DeepSeek will come out with a new announcement, and or ChatGPT has deep research, or all of those things that are changing. And the entrepreneurs that are very, very effective understand how to analyze the marketplace, understand and manage that plan, and then go ahead and learn the things that are necessary for customer acquisition, retention, and good product development.
Amazing. So basically, people, learning, mission, big vision, talking about big vision. So many founders, we build companies, we keep raising money, and we have this North Star. I'm going to become a unicorn, I'm going to become a zebra, different now namings, different directions. And you experience that not one time becoming twice becoming the unicorn. So
you asked me a good question when we had breakfast this morning. You're like, what's the difference working for a startup and working for a unicorn? And no one's ever asked me that question before.
Yeah.
And I'm like,
so
that's a good question.
We would like to know that now in public, actually, what did change?
You'd think when you hit unicorn status, when you're worth $1 billion, all your problems disappear. Nothing could be further from the truth. Everybody knows who you are, right? But the problems are the same. It's always 2 steps forward and 1 step back, right? When you look at the growth of HubSpot on a chart from 0 revenue to $2.4 billion, it looks so nice. It's up and to the right. It looks so easy. And it totally hides all the fiascos, problems, chaos that were involved in getting there, right? The bad people that we hire, the twists and turns of product development, the good or bad launches, the international expansion. Now, a lot of stuff went right, but every time we'd have to reset, and we'd have to understand it's not just smooth sailing. And at $1 billion, right, the bets you make, there are fewer bets, but they're bigger bets, so that if they don't work out for whatever reason, right, it has a more dramatic impact on the entire company. The other thing that I learned at Unicorn and HubSpot specifically is that culture is very important. Last time I was in Rig, I did a presentation from 0 to $2.4 million. Culture and growth, right? And happy to explain how to scale. I'm not so much a sales guy now. I'm more of a growth guy. And sales used to have all of the power, used to have all the glory, used to have all the budget. Now it's really a combination of sales and marketing, or what we call Smarketing. Have you ever heard that term, Smarketing?
Smarketing?
Yeah.
Not really.
Okay. I invented that term in 2000.
Well,
I know. Sales, marketing,
Great
push
one.
together. Because now, another piece of founder advice, right? Everybody has to start with a foundation of thought leadership, right? All the things that Ernest said are true, but we have to do that at scale. So everybody has to trick out their website, talk about their special sauce, and they have to make sure that they're sending out to the universe, this is what we do. Right? And as we were working through that kind of inbound strategy, the emergence of hiring the right people and establishing a world-class culture became very, very important. And the kind of origin story is Brian Halligan, the CEO, went to CEO offsite, and he sat next to the founder of iRobot, the little thing that cleans your apartment and drives a little, like, floor cleaning robot.
Okay.
And he turned to Brian and said, what are you doing about culture? And Brian's like, nothing. He's like, I think culture is going to be big. So he went back, and Dharmesh was a researcher and the co-founder of HubSpot. He said, Dharmesh, will you research what culture is? Dharmesh didn't know what it is, and he researched it, and he came back with a 127-page slide presentation on the HubSpot culture code, right? And what a culture is, sometimes people think it's a little squishy. They're like, culture it just grows naturally. And nothing could be further from the truth. Your product is what you sell to the customer for value. Your culture is the operating system for your employees, right? And HubSpot had a very defined culture with this culture code. And one of the key of cultures is hiring the right people, right? You have no shot of scaling, either as an entrepreneur, a founder, or a scale-up, unless you have the right people in place. You know that. You've done scale up, and you're going to spend a lot of time with these people, right? You're going to be in the trenches. You're going to be working nights and weekends. And if you don't have the right folks that are all on the same page with the right values, the right belief, and understand that it takes 8 years to build a great company, then it's much harder to be successful. So that culture code that was published and is now expanded to even more slides became the foundation for us recruiting the best employees. And at HubSpot, we went through 150 resumes to get to 30 interviews, to get to 1 or 2 hires. It's harder to get into HubSpot when I was there for 17 years than to get into Harvard or MIT. And that focus on a good culture and those employees clearly paid dividends.
Okay, so eat culture for breakfast, there was this saying, right?
The other is, but that's trite. What you got to do is you got to spend money on it. You have to hire the right employees. You got to make sure that you understand the characteristics that you're looking for, right? And in the first 10 or 20 hires for a startup, you're not hiring for a specific skill set necessarily. You're hiring for employee number 11. You're hiring for somebody who's going to do a variety of different things.
For attitude, for energy, for strength. Talking about that, right? In startup scene, we often notice a lot of burnouts, a lot of overworking, there's hustling culture. We're talking right now more and more about the mental health, but how did you make it through all those years? Because you seem that you're not the person who stops in the middle. You do 12, 14-hour days, non-stop. So can we actually scale companies fast with more balance, or it's just the grind you have to do?
You absolutely can. It's hard, but you can. The key is, because HubSpot was mission-driven, and because we enjoyed some success, and because the employees were so great, and because the mission for HubSpot was to help millions of small businesses grow better, right? Even today, that little tear just dropped on my cheek when I said, help millions of small businesses grow better. What better way to spend your life to do that? Now, the process is hard. Right? It's a grind. And 17 years at a tech company, oh my goodness, there's some things. It's a lot. But the only way you can survive is if you're doing something with purpose and meaning, right? And so Dharmesh Shah, the co-founder of HubSpot, is famous for saying to do a startup, you have to have a chromosome loose. You have to be a little weird, right? Because you work so hard for like the odds of being successful. We didn't talk about this, but I pulled the statistic. The odds of starting a company and growing it to $1 billion is 0.0006. So 4 zeros in front of that 6. So it's astronomical that you're going to get to $1 billion. The odds of selling your company, just an average company in 2021, usually takes 49 months, and the return for most founders is about $73,000 a year. So you don't make a lot of money. On an average, you probably make minimum wage, maybe less. Right? So it's not so much the financial compensation, it's the purpose and mission, right? And I was one of those guys when I interviewed with Mark and Brian and Dharmesh. They're like, well, you got to work hard. And I'm like, bring it on. And I loved it. It's like I was competitive with myself. I wanted to see if I could do my 6 startup, and as a 40-something and with 2 kids. My incredible wife, Amy, was very, very supportive because I could do it remotely for the first year, but then I got promoted, and I had to be in Boston every other week. So I was on the road for 7 years, 100% of the time, right?
So what were your routines? What did you do actually to stay sane? Because it's a lot. From being on the road, family, small kids, it's insane.
It's a good question. Number one, partnerships and relationships are very, very important, right? So I always had like my family set, and I had 2 lives. I had a life in Boston and a life in Phoenix. When I was in Phoenix, I spent time. I worked from home. I was the first remote employee, and I was always there. So I got to interact with my entire family. And then when I was in Boston, right, there was nothing else to do. And you know, I don't drink alcohol. I only drink alcohol in 5, it's not exactly.
So how many countries now?
I only drink alcohol in 5 foreign countries, right? Which is a long story that I have to
Latvia is not part of it?
Latvia, if you offer me a beer, I'll have to say thank you very much, Z, but not tonight. And so I have this natural energy, right? And the grind is part of it. So when I was in Boston, I didn't have family responsibilities, so I would start in the office at 7 o'clock in the morning. There was a hotel like right across the street, so I'd stay there, and I'd fly in on Sunday night. The plane would land at 5:30. I would be able to take the cab from the airport into the office, and I'd just start early.
Okay, so grind, optimization, healthy habits.
And love it. I loved it. It was so much fun, number one, because of the mission. But number 2, as the company scaled, I met people that were committed to the same thing that I was, that had the same value, and they would come in right out of college. These 22-year-old like young adults, and they were amazing, right? They were smart, and they were digitally native, and they would do anything I tell them to do, which my kids wouldn't even do that, right? So when I say, go ahead and research this company, they would do it. And at the time, there was this debate about the fallacy of the lazy millennial. People were saying, young adults were self-indulgent and spending all their time on Facebook and weren't doing it. And I didn't find that. I found that we were able to find and select and train and motivate the best young people in the world, and they were amazing. And then I would see them come in and learn how to be professionals, and then I would see them learn how to be managers, and then I would see and teach them and see them take director responsibilities, and then vice president. And it was the most amazing thing to see somebody right out of college go all the way to be a senior vice president at HubSpot, and to take all the things that they learned about culture, about growth, about good product-led development, about technology, about all of those things, and apply modern technology and modern business techniques to the things that they learn.
Amazing. So it seems like you've been really brought on in working with people, and I could see it as a result that you later on established your Tyre mentorship program. You started actively investing. So I'm very curious to ask right now, if you go to Dan's website, so he is one of those investors who is super clear about the investment thesis, what do they invest, the tickets, what they don't invest. So I would like to ask you the question about failures, right? You've been mentoring an insane amount of founders. You've been investing in quite 30+ your portfolio is.
30 portfolio companies worth about $1.5 billion.
So tell us, what are the traits you see when someone will fail or succeed?
So failure is part of the entrepreneurial ecosystem, right? And it's trite. Everybody says it. You got to lean into your failures. The problem is it's freaking excruciating when you do it, and as a leader when you do it. But it's happened to me multiple times, right? At Businessland, I got fired, and I got fired because I was a young adult that made a bad decision, right? And I didn't take the advice of a senior executive, and he turned to the CEO and said, all right, if you don't get this guy out of Los Angeles, then I'm going to quit. And so I was removed from that position. I taught sales training for 6 months, and then I was able to get another position. And I learned my lesson, and that was
so
very,
you went
very
back
fun.
to the company, right?
I stayed with the company because I had a good boss who said, you made a huge mistake, a tremendous miscalculation. I had a human resource person come to me and say, you need to do this. And I said, all right, I'll take that under advisement, which is not the right thing to say when a senior executive tells you got to do this. And in hindsight, I was a complete idiot. Number one, I would have handled the situation much differently. The lady who was involved had, I was not empathetic towards understanding that.
Okay.
Number two, if somebody who's a senior executive tells you to do it, taking it under advisement is not the right response. You could say nothing, but you should very much consider the expertise of someone like that. And number three, I was lucky enough to have good folks who are like, okay, you're skilled in this area, but there's a lot of growth and development in you understanding how to read people and taking direction. And within the same company, I was able to move that over.
Amazing. So let me rephrase it. Let's go back to the investments. What are the traits of a successful founder who's really going to go far with the startup? Because ideas, market changes, right? What's important is the team. It's important the vision and the direction. So when you invest, what are those few?
7 T's. Number one, the team. Number two, the technology. Number three, the traction, and that's a big one, right? It's harder in the Baltics, but not impossible. If you show traction of getting customers and retaining customers, people will come here, they will find you, and they will throw money at you, right? There are 2 ways to go about it. And Tyre Angel has been around for 10 years, so I see 40, maybe 50 business plans a month, right? I'm here in Latvia to talk to lots of founders to understand if there's anything that I'm missing, right? And of those 50 business plans, half of them are like, we need $500,000 to try to build this widget or to go build this software. And they have no customers, they have no traction, and they're going to spend all of their time raising that money. The other half have said, I took $40,000 US or whatever, and I went out and I got 15 customers, and we're at this level of MRR, and we expect to grow. And those people already have customers. They've already validated the model. They've already taken an insanely small amount of money, and they've proven that they can go out and get customers. Those are the kind of people that are good entrepreneurs, because no one has ever seen a business plan that equates to exactly what the business model is going to do, right? Once you have customers, everything changes. And getting your first customers are really, really hard. That's why you sell to your friends and family. And those kind of startups, right, do much better. The last 10 years, VC is going through an amazing change, and there is, unfortunately, no correlation between a VC-invested company and a bootstrap company for success. You would think that VC companies would have the experience to pick better bets of companies that would grow, and in fact, it's negatively correlated, right? So in the United States now, there's school of thought called practical founders, which is take a little bit of money, bootstrap to where you need to be, right? And then take a little bit more money to get to profitability, and that's a better way to retain more of the wealth for the founders, a better way to manage the company because it's not so fast and you're not burning through customers and employees, and a better way to have a reasonable company in the future.
Brilliant. All right. So I had plenty of questions still in my head, but since we're coming to the end, what would be advice right now for all the founders we have here, aspiring founders and entrepreneurs who are building something? And yeah.
Yeah. So a couple of things. Number one, find an ideal customer profile, right? The way we grow in 2025 is a little bit different. We used to call and talk to everybody. Now you want to get a very specific niche. The riches are in the niches. You've heard me say that multiple times. And I didn't invent that, but the more focused you can be, number one, you get better in the vocabulary, the seasonality, you get to know those people. And it's actually easier to grow if you're being very specific about who you're talking to. The next thing you do is get a good inbound process so more people are coming to you. The third thing you do is the connection of calling people and say, I want to talk with you either about this business problem or about ways you approach this business problem so that you start that relationship. And the inbound process is all about, number one, treating people like human beings, which is rare in 2025. And number two, we always help before we sell. So if any founders need help with their sales process, to the extent of my bandwidth, I'm here for 2 days and happy to assist.
Yeah, make sure that you find that, and it's for sure all about the people, all about being human and doing business together. That was Dan Tyre. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Z. Amazing. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah, so good.
Thank you.
So good.
It was really, really, really nice, and I was taking even notes. And at one moment, I was like, okay, I'm taking already too many notes. But I wanted to share something that, was since the very beginning, as we usually forget what was in the beginning, that every business is people business.
Yeah.
So it's all about the people. You have to be likable. People will work harder if there is a stated mission, and employees over customers overall always have a plan. At least if it's not perfectly polished, at least you have a plan, you know where you're going. Keep learning. And what was interesting, that I also have this feeling that when you hit that unicorn status, then it's kind of like, yeah, we've made it. And it was funny to hear from Dan that he says, nothing changes, except that you are more known, everyone knows you, but you still have the same problems, and it's like two steps forward, one step back. So it was great. I really enjoyed it.